kind of civilian outranks a military officer? Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and a couple of weeks ago I did a video talking about the relative difference between the senior executive service and general officers. And the bottom line is that if you're working in a place where there's a mix of government civilians and military personnel, you have to have an understanding of their relative equivalences. As it turns out, finding good references to make the obvious comparison that you'd want to make, well, that could be easier said than done. Part of the reason for this is because while there are government policies and regulations that make direct comparisons between military ranks and government civilian ranks, almost all of these guidances are based off of specific situations. So today I'm going to show you a couple of these tables. I'm going to show you how they're used, and I'll point out some important differences. Just to get started, let's look at Department of Defense Instruction 1000.01. The specific purpose of this guidance is for the issuing of Geneva Convention ID cards. And if you go back to the enclosures, you'll find a table that I've cropped down here that shows the relationship between military grades and the GS system. So, for example, you can see that 06, a colonel or a Navy captain, well, that's equivalent to a GS-15. And you can see that an 02 is equivalent to a GS-8 or a GS-9. Now, bear in mind that the whole purpose of this table is to comply with Geneva Convention categories. And this regulation is specific that these rank equivalencies, well, they don't convey authority over military personnel to civilians just by virtue of their rank. However, there is this point that there is a desire for consistency. Now, like I said before, these tables vary depending on the regulation that covers the specific situation that they're to be used for. So now, let's take a look at the Navy's Social and Protocol Handbook. Personally, I like this handbook because it's absolutely full of really useful guidance as far as social situations, especially formal events. And in Annex A, they have a military to civilian equivalency table. Here again, you can see that there is an equivalency between 06s and GS-15s. But if you look at 02, you'll notice that this table ranks 02s against GS-10. And remember, in the Geneva Convention table, 02s were ranked against GS-9s and GS-8s. Now, like I said, this guide is really useful, and one of the nice things it does is it talks about the rationale behind these precedences. And one of the key points here is that in day-to-day business and ceremonial occasions, it is the office that we pay respect to by ranking the individual according to our perceived importance of that position. So, military and civilian equivalence is a lot less about the rank of the individual and a lot more about the importance of the position that those individuals hold. The other thing that this Navy manual explains is that in addition to the position that an individual holds, the date of appointment into that position is also used to determine precedence. So that's where you get your date of rank or your date of appointment. Now, as a final example, let's go take a look at the Financial Management Regulation. And here we're going to go to Volume 11A, Chapter 6. Down in Appendix A, they provide yet another table. But, as before, you have to pay attention to the reason this conversion table exists. And the reason that the Financial Management Regulation is concerned here is because of the relative pay associated with these positions. So, once again, you can see that 06s are equivalent to GS-15s, and here an 02 is equivalent to a GS-11. But so what? I mean, what does any of this mean for you? Well, I think that there are two important takeaways. First, if you find yourself in a situation where people are starting to talk about making comparisons between military and civilian ranks, the question you should be asking is, what is the purpose of this comparison? And to the extent possible, you should be using the conversion table that is most appropriate to the situation. For example, if there's a property accountability investigation going on, you might use a different table than you would for a dining in. The second important takeaway is that you might find yourself in a situation where you can't find the ideal conversion table. If that happens, my recommendation is that you want to acknowledge that you do not have an appropriate conversion table, and then clearly state the conversion table that you are using. Just between you and me, I would tend to err on the side of using the Geneva Convention table, and I'd only use the FMR table if the comparison was specifically about costs. And maybe here's a final point. When the time comes that people start to quibble over the seniority of civilian or military ranks, be mindful that you don't behave in a manner that is disrespectful to any of the members of your team. At the end of the day, we all have hard jobs to do, and we all deserve to be respected. The last thing that any leader wants to do is make some sort of off-the-cuff decision only to have a regulation come back and reverse their decision. And now, if you want to see some considerations of what you should do if you're being senior rated by a member of the Senior Executive Service, watch this video.